Hello, hello.
Back.
Oh, where is this thing?
Our internet came back on just in time, so that's great. Yeah.
I think we might have scared some people off though.
Yeah,
Mm, good to see everybody.
very much so. Mm.
Aloha.
Mm. You can take the time and look at everyone if you want. Mm. Great.
I hope everyone's doing well wherever you are.
Mm.
Yeah, we did lose power for about 8 hours, but we're glad it came back on in time. So yeah. So let's get started. A little sitting. Just taking the time to find a relatively comfortable seated posture, and letting the eyes come to close. Be noticing where the attention feels immediately drawn in your experience. Are there certain aspects of what are happening in the body, in the sense doors, and the heart mind that seem to be drawing the attention most clearly? Or is there a sense of the various happenings, seeing, smelling, hearing, tasting, body, mind? There's no right answer. Just helpful to kind of get a sense of what the terrain that we're encountering right now feels like. What are the predominant experiences? Maybe getting a sense of what is the flavor of mind or flavors of mind that seem arisen right now. Noticing if there's agitation or sleepiness, interest, dullness, aversion, calm. Not needing to fiddle with it, but just recognizing and maybe getting a sense of if there's too much strain on the attention, too much pressure we're applying, or if it needs a little nudging, a little more encouragement, something we can reflect on throughout any sitting, trying to find that balanced energy, not straining, not forcing. while being careful not to only meander. And always this carefulness with observation and what is being observed, aspiring to kindness there, gentleness, clarity, also a permissiveness, an openness to whatever is being seen and observed. And recognizing the value of gathering the attention in a primary field. Just one thread, one aspect of what's happening that we feel we can have a more or less interested, balanced, kind-hearted relationship with. Something that's moving, changing, that's alive. Not so difficult that it evokes a lot of tension, a lot of strain, stress. So it can be as narrow as the area around the abdomen, where the sometimes subtle sensations of breathing can be noticed. Doesn't have to be entirely distinct or clear. It's this general sense of an expansion and arising, and the slow falling contraction, the spaces in between. Not needing to do anything with what we're observing, not controlling the breath, not making it how we think it should be. And just noticing, oh, in this small field, the changing sensations, increasing pressure, decreasing pressure, increasing tension, decreasing tension, movement, pausing, just trying to stay with the changes, not trying to get anything, not trying to get concentrated, get insight, receiving the breath, trying to stay connected as it changes. Maybe noticing where the mind tends to wander, look for something more interesting, more dynamic. Imagine elsewhere. Just noticing the mind, heart's tendency for that, and seeing where we recognize it. We observe that as mind, wanting, not wanting, imagining, planning, reviewing. Maybe we notice some emotional content. And find our way back to this area in the abdomen, just receiving the sensations. Noting what we notice. It's not uncommon for this field to kind of feel a bit too narrow, too constricted. And so just trusting that we can open up that field of attention if we need to or want to, including the hands where they're touching, noticing same range of experiences, pressure, warmth, coolness, hardness, softness. Seeing if that feels like a stable base of anchoring the attention. Receiving, sustaining, curious about the changing nature, what we call hands, what we call the breath. There is always the option to open up further. It feels more engaging to receive all of the experiences throughout the body. It feels like a little bit of a wider field. Helps keep the attention connected over time. While the field may be wider, it's the same sensations happening throughout. Movement, pressure, moisture, dryness, range of temperature, hardness, always moving, always changing. Not aiming for anything beyond continued relationship of observation, receptivity, interest, care. And if there's nowhere in the body that feels safe to land and stay connected, just trusting we can move to the stream of sound. Different, than the stream of physicality in some ways, but still changing loudness, softness, texture, tone, and vibration. The mind names, identifies, considers, and recognize that as mind. And reattune to the sounds themselves, changing, coming and going. Just finding our way moment by moment, connecting, receiving, exploring, getting lost, coming back, trying our best to stay connected to this unfolding reality and sound, and body, and breath, open to whatever we observe. So, Michelle and I thought we would take some time this week to answer any questions that folks might have about your practice, anything we might be able to support you with, the instructions, or um, good things, hard things, unknown things, whatever might be helpful. And so, the best way to let us know you have a question is at the bottom. Oh, I feel like they keep changing this. Yeah, at the bottom of your Zoom page, there's a react button with a little heart, a crooked heart there. You can click on that, and then there's a button that says raise hand, and we will know that you have a question. If that is difficult to find, you can just type into the chat that you have a question. We'll call on you. Or it,
Mine says there's an AI that will answer your question.
oh, we should just have the AI do this part.
I didn't ask for this, but
That's
I
way
have,
easier.
it says
That's
I have
great.
an AI companion, and I'm just gonna press it. No, just kidding.
You'll get some answer. We'll see if you can tell which is our answer or the AI answer. And if none of those things work, you could just ask the AI. You can wave around, and we'll tend to see folks if you have a question. Hi, Sun. Let's see. Oh, wait, hold on. I can't hear you. Can you unmute? Let's see. Hey.
Mine is not a practice question, but like a practical question. Like, does the Theravada has any special funeral liturgy, protocol? Like if someone died in the family.
Can
You know,
you
it's funny. I think,
can you repeat the
yeah,
question? Yeah.
it's so basically of like what is the kind of funerary protocols in Theravada. You know, it's funny. I feel like we're mostly familiar with like the monastic ones, that we've seen in Burma, um, of different, ceremonies that are held, um, and they tend to probably be more extravagant than like for lay people. Um, I don't know if Michelle, you've seen more, have a sense of more, but I do feel like that we have felt that they're important, and that there are many layers to which like the honoring of someone's life and someone's passing away is really important, and whether that's like a kind of collective thing that people do, as more of a community, family, friends, or even as our own kind of personal reflections and kind of honoring our relationship with people. Sometimes that sense of kind of coming up a little bit with maybe our own um, ceremonies. Of course, there is the certain chants like the Anicca Vata Sankara. That I think, Sun, you probably know of, like the you know that is often chanted. At different funeral services and kind of memorial services of recognizing that all conditioned things are impermanent, coming to coming to be. They pass away, and the stilling of this is the deepest peace. Um, but is there more? Are you trying to think of?
Yeah. Do you know that Matt passed away?
We did just learn that. Yeah, yeah. And so we were, just because we had just gotten home, we were thinking of doing something probably in the next Sunday sitting. Just as we have done a little bit at different times when Sangha members have passed away. Um, and then just as a side, trying to figure out what to do in terms of with the Honolulu Sangha in particular. Um, so just folks who don't know or didn't know Matt Hawkins, he would come to the Sunday sitting as well regularly, the online. So he would ask questions sometimes, so people may be familiar with him. But it is on our minds and hearts. So and yes, of kind of how to honor his life and passing. Though I know his family is also planning something, or there's some process that we're not as aware of what's happening in terms of we're kind of waiting to hear what's happening. Yeah.
The chant Anicca Wata Sankara, I learned at a funeral. So I think that it was a Buddhist funeral. So I just want to say that's a very important chant and covers it all, really. Um, but if you live in a Buddhist culture, then you would have kind of a whole support system at the monastery or nunnery with the lay people, like somehow that would come together in a way that isn't as easy to pull off in a non-Buddhist culture. But what I have witnessed over the years is similar to any big event that is a milestone or rite of passage in a person's life, that say a wedding or anything like a funeral. There are ways in which I have been part of them being designed or helping people design something that would reflect an understanding of a very deep understanding of acceptance of death in a way that I think is very supportive for everybody. So been part of them where people are not Buddhist, but the person who died or someone close died was Buddhist or very Buddhist. And of course, in Upper Burma, there's the Irrawaddy River that often the ceremony is done close to the river, so the ashes are taken out in a boat, and then there's chanting, and the ashes are put in the river. So that is mostly what I've witnessed in Burma, is that kind of very powerful process where everybody gets in a little boat and goes out in the river, and the nuns or the monks chant, and you put the ashes in the river. And I think that can be done, has been done here, like on this island. We do that at the ocean instead of a river. The ashes are put, the sayadaws are usually put on a funeral pyre so that you have an open, huge fire, not like a crematorium, but the body is put on the fire and burnt, and there's chanting. So I think the important thing to do is always that feeling of the people who love you come together in a public way and honor your life, and say goodbye, right? It's like it's that kind of chanting for also the next life, really. Of course, there was the one thing that we witnessed in Burma that was so powerful was that the happy Sayadaw, Myatang Sayadaw, had his body put in a glass coffin. and it's been gradually deteriorating. And you can go into the pagoda and actually see him in the glass coffin deteriorating slowly. So there's that's probably the most powerful thing I've ever seen somebody choose to do to help us all witness. He even had his glasses. His glasses are still on. Very moving.
Probably.
Yeah. So I think so, and I think that it's usually a combination of kind of getting to talk with the people kind of wanting to organize it, and usually something often simple. In the Buddhist world, it's usually something quite simple. Jesse, when someone here died, we had that ceremony at the beach. That's the last time I think we did something here.
Yeah. Gavin. I think, you know, one thing I'd say about in general, but also just, thinking in terms of Matt and anyone in our lives, it's like, the Tibetans do have a notion of this kind of interim period, the Bardo, and I can't remember, is it like 49 days or something like that, right? Where there's like a fixed period of time where you're kind of in between and you have a lot of choices to make and a lot of pressure to make the right choices, and people are here like rooting you on and helping guide you. In the Theravadan schema, there isn't always that sense, in the kind of, in the Orthodox kind of perspective, that really there is an understanding that there is a death consciousness and there's rebirth consciousness, and like the very next mind moment you have been conceived in your next life. There's no rest. There's no break in between lifetimes, and I think there's something powerful in that perspective, and whether that feels true or not is like another question. But I do think there is some sense of like knowing, having that there is, unless someone has become fully enlightened, and you never know what happens in someone's last moments that are very private, um, that they will come back into existence in some other form, right? Or that the maybe it's not them, but the momentum of formations continues, and that is, there's often pain involved in both sides of that, right? Of the ending of one life and the coming into the next life. And so, finding a sense of connection, of compassion, of metta is always helpful. It's helpful to us, but I feel like 100% it's helpful to them. And that I do also feel, and we've talked about at times, that it doesn't always feel like someone is just gone, that there is a period of time often where some aspect of them feels present and available, and more available even, right? Because they're not so necessarily locked into their kind of recent physical form, and that there is an ability to connect, and a responsibility to feel like that connection of caring and of kindness and of well-wishing and of sympathy and of understanding, is something that we can cultivate and offer to them. Feels really important, like that you do it right away and you don't stop for a while. This idea that it does feel like you have some period of time where they're still available to your heart, and maybe it is in another form, maybe it's, in some ethereal realm, I don't know, but that it's important as an individual to do that, right? To keep that connection, especially if it's hard. We're going to have our own feelings about it, our own grief, our own confusion, our own sadness, and there is something important about not denying that we have to go through our own process, but that actually caring, like finding that place of caring about them and caring for them and feeling like you're sharing that with them is really important, and
Yeah.
not always easy. Um, I, yeah, so, and then in terms of the right, I mean, I think we're going to get in touch with folks and sort of figure out what's, appropriate and possible in terms of, more locally and stuff over here, but, or over there in Honolulu, but we'll do a little offering as we have done here as well for just whenever we know someone in the Sangha has passed away. It does feel important, whether folks know them or not.
I tried to send him some metta, and that was hard.
Mm.
Now I remember why we shouldn't send metta to someone.
Right. Yeah. Well, that it's like in the thing they're saying if you're trying to do concentration practice that it's hard to send metta to someone who's
Yeah,
passed away.
but
But yeah, it's difficult. Yeah, right. But
lots
maybe
of
compassion or something.
right. Yeah.
Um, I think that we often will assess time for someone who's died in a way that's very linear and very much like how we experience time. And I don't think it's the same. And so when death consciousness happens, and sometimes they call it liminal space, but it's like it could be that one mind moment happens in the amount of time the Tibetans say, like 49 days or whatever. It's like that sense of time. We have to be very, very careful that the sense of time is very different with death consciousness, and even fetal consciousness is very different than our normal sense of time, just like as we know an infant's sense of time is very different than or someone with dementia's sense of time is different. It's like, so just to keep in mind that what Jesse's saying, I'm just going to amplify that when we're alive, we need all the help we can get. And when we die, we need all the help we can get. Meaning that metta, karuna, mudita, upekkha, and all of that, like that person, when they die, are going to be a sponge at that time because there isn't a body to get in the way. So wherever that sense of time and place, I think that very much fades and diminishes, and that the accessibility to the Brahma Viharas is massive and boundless, like really boundless. So step on the gas. If you
Good for
know, if you know
observing that.
Matt, if you know Matt, I would say step on the gas.
And
It
I do
doesn't.
think it's a time for us this is like these things are what are the traditions we create, and what do we inherit from our direct Buddhist lineage, our other cultural inheritance, and what are the things that feel appropriate. I actually feel like it's something it feels really meaningful in terms of the Dhamma, at this period and this kind of cultural context of coming up with things that feel appropriate, and connected to our realities. Of course, it's hard with like online and people aren't necessarily in a shared physical space, but I do think this question of like the cultural aspect of what we're creating is important and worth being thoughtful about. When I was in Ecuador and Bolivia last year, and a lot of the old instruments you'd see, the flutes and stuff like that, are all made of bones. And I was like, that would be great. I would love all my bones to be made instruments of. And I found on Oahu, there's a place, there's one, it's not a crematorium, it's like there's some other technology, right, where
It's called bone scraping,
you're just good. Yeah, that's the old way.
basically. Yeah.
Well, but it's and it's been approved in the state of Hawaii for because it's aligned with like, traditional Hawaiian practices of like preserving bones. But the technology itself is like, I don't know, some other, it's green and doesn't create any carbon, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, they don't have the machine yet, but I'm on the list. So, Michelle's trying to wait to see if we can get a permit to put her in a glass coffin, but I think that might be a ways,
My
a
plan
ways
B
away.
is my plan B is that I know someone who can put you in the ocean, who can take you out and put you in the ocean and feed the sharks.
I know a
So
guy.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
we do know a guy. We do know a guy. He can do it. So, anyway, that's a little. At any rate, I think so, and I also think you don't necessarily have to have the image of the person in your mind. It can be an image of this life. And so don't feel like you have to not have the image of Matt like in the future for yourself. It's like it can be um, anything you can do to make the connection is what matters. So often I think if you just remember a time when you were with him and connecting in some way and happy and maybe eating at a potluck, something, right? There's some connection that you can have that I am sure will be received.
We used to have lunch together down at Home Food. So,
That's it. I know we need to figure out how to come together in some way around this for sure. We're not at all negating it. We were just kind of waiting for the word to move forward.
But yes, and thank you for bringing him into the circle. Yeah.
Mhm.
Mm. Back in. Kate?
I
Okay. Okay.
I I feel I find more beauty and confidence in just being vulnerable in moment to moment. And with that, I'm facing, just because I'm like going back to school, there's institutional thing that like I'm faced with I'm presented with a lot of solidity and a lot of sureness, which goes kind of not against, but it's not what I'm practicing. What I'm practicing is finding security in insecurity. That's what y'all say, and that's be my practice. But then, and I do really find beauty in that, and also certain confidence, and it's really helping me. It's so supportive, and I'm noticing that when external security is like so presented in my face all the way around, I don't know how to, like, I really pull back and I retreat, and that might be a appropriate response, to be honest. But I then I start building this sense of, oh, that's okay. It's okay. It's just like so much solidity is like overwhelming. That's okay. Like, is it actually solid? No, it really isn't. So but there's so many opportunities for that to happen, and I'm just getting disheartened over and over in an institution. And I just wanted to hear what comes up. to you too, because I know you both have worked with different institutions and you do work with different institutions, big or small. So, um, yeah, around practice, sure.
Yeah. Can I ask you about like are you mostly encountering that in terms of like human interactions and like people acting very sort of certain and solid and their views and just like the kind of or is it more or is it more just like the schedule and the paperwork and like the institutional kind of like protocols and things like that? Is it more personal or more sort of on the
Like
impersonal level or both?
it's both, but like scheduling and everything, I'm like, well, they don't know. Like I'm for sure that like they had to like everybody has to deal with whatever that happens in the course of, a day or a week or a month. So that I think I'm getting way more overwhelmed by um different people's certainty, which is also like, wow, like it's amazing to see that. I was like, wow, you're so confident. That's incredible. Like how? Um, yeah, but I think it's more personal.
Yeah.
I,
I don't know, Michelle, do you want to
yeah,
start? Yeah.
I this is probably not going to be that helpful. So I'll try to go from the deep, I'm going to a deeper place first, and then we'll kind of come up as Jesse and I go back and forth. But one thing that I just do is if I'm in touch with the vulnerability, just even dukkha, right? Just moment to moment vulnerability, right? That we never know what's going to happen. Um, if I'm with someone, I tend to tune into theirs as well. So it might be from a billion years of teaching, but it's like it's that sense of like I'm also in touch with either there might be 3 or 4 people or a lot but that I don't keep it just here. Do you, and so that practice has enabled me to when somebody is acting very opposite that, I don't leave the vulnerable place with them. So that I understand that need for that kind of security and confidence. I accept that layer of reality, but I also deeply keep in touch with their vulnerability. Does that make sense? So it's not as it's humbling, it can be disappointing, it can be all the things you described, discouraging, or just even so different a way of approaching life. But it helps me know that the truth is that they're also vulnerable, even if they're not in touch with it. So it's like I'm allowing that level of reality and defense or need for that, but I also stay in touch with the truth that they're also vulnerable.
Yeah, I think that's one of many plays I missed for
Yeah,
sure.
but I would recommend it's a practice. It's not like it goes away. It's more like it just deepens. And let me think of other things to say, but I feel like that's the most most important. But Jesse, maybe you have something to say, and then I'll have
Yeah.
something else to say. Yeah.
I think I have a few. It's like I don't know again how like coherent
Yeah.
it'll sort of seem, but I really do. I mean, sort of like just stepping back a little. I mean, I think that it's such a that you're going into that you have your practice, we'll say, like the dimensions of your practice that include the like formal sitting, and that also include the like the physicality of dance and expression, right? That you have that as this like part of yourself that's like you feel like is your practice. I or that I would assume you feel like is a part of your practice, right? And then you went from like a so many years of like professional work with that, and that had its own antagonisms in terms of something that's very personal and beautiful and powerful and profound for you, but that's also this kind of like livelihood and exchange monetary and all the stuff that was like kind of enabling but also challenging around it in terms of like as a professional thing. And then so now to go into it as like an academic thing must have like a similar you're encountering like again it's like this part of your practice, and that it's it's encountering a kind of like an academic framework and response that is powerful, fascinating, important, and interesting, and also is going to also tend towards like disembodied and intellectual and kind of like very, very heady and probably outside of the realm of what you're sort of experiencing directly and want to explore actually in terms of your movement practice. Anyway, so I see there's like it makes sense, right? That part of what you're engaging and kind of encountering, whether it's in the formal like the academic piece of it and the formal studies, or just the personalities and the interactions with other students or professors, where it's like here is another it's another place where something that's like intuitive and fluid and exploratory is encountering a kind of like these other realities that can feel like at odds with it. So I mean, I think that it's more sort of like looking at the kind of overarching arc and seeing that's like, okay, well, this is part of the dynamic of that, of like, how do you still maintain the integrity of your practice in all of its kind of formations and iterations, given this sort of new context that you're trying to explore some part of it in that's also very vulnerable and also very it's growing and you're doing some exploring, and that it's sort of encountering this kind of hardness and concreteness and certainty and all of this, whether it's schedule or views or just kind of personality. So I guess it's more just like I appreciate that. I appreciate that it's part of the growth. And then really I think what Michelle is saying is like, where do we when we encounter the sort of solidity of someone else's view or perspective or mind or whatever, and that sense of what is our work, what is like the spiritual work in that, and where does it trigger our own sense of either agreement or disagreement, and needing to kind of then get solid in response to that. Where does it feel like we don't want to, where is that appropriate and necessary at times? Where is it times where we want to stay in the vulnerability and we don't necessarily need to challenge or agree with like what someone is saying, but how do you hold that hardness in our own minds and our hearts, right, of whether it's ours or theirs, like to feel the dukkha of it, I think is really important. As Michelle is saying, it's like oh, there's something painful in this, whether you get a sense of like a deeper pain in it or just the hardness itself, the certainty, the firmness. It's painful just because things are not like that. Nothing is, things are more fluid, and so you can feel that, or you can feel the dukkha that it might inspire in your own heart, mind, body, of like in response and contraction in whatever way, and just I mean, I think to be committed, but to be humble, to know that there's going to be times where it's overwhelming, know that there's times where we get reactive, and we harden our own views and minds and stuff like, and we get into a dynamic that's that way. Other times that we find a way to kind of protect ourselves in the kind of intuitive vulnerability in the midst of it, and other times where we know where we need space, and you get a sense of what distance can you have with the structure or with the sort of certainty of people, the culture, the mind culture of people, and where do you need to be more back, and that you have certain levers of kind of like where you're protecting, where you're exploring internally, and how does it, what do you end up being for people? I mean, I think this question that Michelle brings up of like, as a teacher, there's a way that this maybe becomes part of like the method of it. There is something similar, right? Of like, well, what is the role you're playing in people's lives as like a listener, as someone who's holding more space, or as someone who's getting into it with them, because whatever, there's room for that as well. I don't know, Kate, if any of that feels helpful, but it's what occurs to me kind of initially. Yeah.
Well, definitely. And I think both of what you said is pointing to, it made one aspect clear, that like that external solidity that's being presented, that really hinders me to be in touch with dukkha, like of their nature. Then that really reflects back, and I almost like lose in touch with my own dukkha. And because of the practice, then when I start getting in touch with my own dukkha, it becomes so devastating sometimes. But yeah, just keeping keeping it more open, in the sense that like, oh, dukkha, dukkha, dukkha would definitely be helpful. So yeah, thank you.
I, g- I just think build in a lot of recovery time, meaning like it's just so essential because kinesthetically, what I feel when you describe it or I tune into it, it's like you're hitting a wall. Like it's so solid, you're hitting a wall, and you can lose yourself in that, right? You lose your own sense of vulnerability. If you stay in it, it becomes you're part of the wall. So I guess that you're so kinesthetic in that way. I would just really almost beg you to try to make enough airtime for non-wall space just to keep that connection to your own vulnerability. It's really important, because we could say lots of other things because, institutions are institutions. We've been at it a long time, right? And so there's a lot of unnecessary walls. So there's a lot of structures that one can at least have some rational acceptance of in this institutional world, but there are people who are in the position to enforce them that are often not very good at doing that without walls, right? Like there's just like and then there's just the actual places where we really don't want to comply, but have to.
Yeah,
And all that requires a lot of recovery time.
yeah. And that's not, supported at all, as much as people say like, oh, take a
Right.
rest.
Right.
Oh,
No, I know. I know it's like you're jumping into it. You're jumping into the world of walls.
no.
For a purpose.
Indeed. Yeah, for a reason. And it's
Yeah.
brave. It's
Yeah.
courageous. And
Yeah.
it's taxing. That's why it's courageous. Yeah. Mm. Thanks, Kate.
Yeah.
One more, Nicole.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Um, uh, Kate helped me sort of frame things because it's interesting. I feel like I'm having the same issue, but from an opposite, like, pers preference perspective, in the sense that I feel like um, living in this time of such great change and upheaval, it feels like people are becoming more and more vulnerable outwardly. Like, at least that's what I'm experiencing. Not being in an institution right now. So it just feels like that's making me hit a wall more often. And maybe this is just a question about boundaries, because I feel like a message I'm getting maybe from some other places is like, just don't even pick up the phone, or don't be in certain situations, which is hard for me to make those choices. And then, of course, the doubt is just comes up really quickly um, around all of that. So I don't know if that made sense, but yeah.
Yeah. And it sounds also like, given that your recent like training of, of like being the person who is with people in vulnerable times, and that you are the listener, and that maybe that's not just like a professional thing, but that's also like how people relate to you, and that you feel, is there part of it just feels like kind of like getting kind of overexposed and over, that's like too raw in terms of people's the vulnerability that people are sharing with you, or the
Yeah, I think that helps me because I think because I'm not doing it right now, when I'm not, when there's not like a container for it like that, then it feels like it's just spilling into my life too much, and I don't know how to have appropriate boundaries in my relationships, or which isn't even, when I examine that actually like more clearly, I don't think it's true, but there's like a lot of doubt around it. And yeah. Uh,
Mhm. That you don't think it's true that you are, it's doubt around the what if it feels appropriate to hold boundaries, or that the
yeah, I
yeah
think that, but also around like, did I have, then also like looking back, like, did I have, um, um, or just, I just feel like there isn't enough recovery time,
yeah yeah
everything
yeah
that's going on.
yeah
And
sure,
yeah,
totally.
is probably how we all feel.
I mean, and I do think, I don't know what Michelle will say, but it is a lot of it is about. I mean, it is the same. Like you said, it's similar and different. But this question of where do you have enough boundaries? Where can you draw the line with people in a practical way around like how much is getting kind of spilled or dumped or shared with you, or whatever the kind of language you'd want to use, and like where's your own capacity to process it and kind of digest it at its edge, and where is it, feel like it's within the realm, but you can still kind of grow and have access to your own, fountains of stability. I mean, these are all, I don't think there's ever like a stable place most of us ever get to any of that. It's a constant kind of negotiation based on conditions. What are the conditions right now for us? And that there are just times, whether it's the time that we're in or just times in any of our lives where we're having to go beyond what we'd like to do, or what feels appropriate for us, because people are in need, because there's enough despair, or there's enough calling, or whatever, for it. And then there is just to be cognizant of where that's overtaxing, and how much strain can you put on the system without where's the cost? There's going to be a cost somewhere if you're not able to kind of just be digesting it all in the moment. And so, does that happen consciously? Does it happen unconsciously? Does it happen sort of more in the shadows? It's like, it's going to happen somewhere. And so, the better we can be at being conscious about it and giving ourselves time and boundaries and what have you, um, the better. But it's not, it's not to say that it's easy, and not to say that you figured out in one moment that it doesn't change with the next phone call or something like that. I think also kind of what Michelle said a little bit or part of what I would say around what Michelle said in the last is sometimes it's the content that's overwhelming, and the views, and the kind of like how kind of jumbled maybe people can get, or caught up in things, and that's sort of hard to keep up with and like deal with. But if you can go underneath it and feel the emotional quality, and not be as maybe sort of precise about the details of what they're saying, and trying to track maybe every moment of it, sometimes it's just like that tuning into like, oh, there's some kind of agony, there's some kind of anxiety, there's stress, there's worry, and that can be more simple, even for our own hearts to connect with. It's like, oh, and that you care about this person's hardship, and that can elicit a kind of compassion that is not as taxing. Trying to solve stuff for people, and then the interpersonal dynamics, if these are friends or family members, or there's all kinds of stuff there that is like, of course, more difficult to manage. But sometimes it really is, if you still have to listen to what they're saying enough to be able to respond. But like at the same time, it's like kind of trying to hang out more in the feeling tone of it. And often that's going to be more helpful to them anyway, is actually connecting around like, oh, that sounds really hard. Or, just like the emotional aspect is often much more manageable and real, and less kind of confusing and taxing as the kind of, all the cerebral content that any of us can kind of create around it.
I can piggyback on that maybe a little bit, Nicole. I do think that there's a lot more, generally, there's people who are in a lot more pain. Like, it's true. And we're exposed to a lot more pain. And we know that it's the resistance to pain that causes suffering, right? We know it. But if we are hanging out with people that are in resistance to pain, and then we are at our limit with opening to resistance to pain. And as Jesse says, we're trying to help in those ways of naming it and joining with it. Then for us to be able to respect that we are at our limit of at least being mindful of being resistant to the pain, right? And so I think of recovery time a lot as just getting enough energy back to like be aware of that resistance to the pain that is happening around us, because there's so much of it. And a lot of people are not doing what Jesse just described, which is dropping under the content and opening up to being mindful of the pain, right? And so that is the question, and I'm hesitant to bring it up, but I think it's such an unusual example where I never read this, but I used to hear whispers of it in my early days of practice. And in Burma, you hear whispers that if a person gets fully enlightened, that they will die if they don't get to a monastery or nunnery within 7 days. Think about it. Just think about that. Like, that is so powerful. So it's the opposite of what we're even describing, where it's somebody is fully enlightened and they're saying if they're in the world, they're going to die. So I like to keep that in mind, because that's why I talk about recovery time a lot, because I certainly need it. And I feel like people have this idea and they compare themselves with other people that are just jamming it out and jamming it out and jamming it out. And it's like we're supposed to be like that. But actually, I've never been like that. But I've, pushed myself mercilessly most of my life. But it's still, I'm quite aware that I am not that type.
Can I say something about that, Michelle?
Well, I know that was a.
I think it's important, and because so what I'll say is my understanding of where that notion comes from is from the suttas and all the stories, which is to say that like there are lay people that get fully enlightened, but in the stories there's like they end up either dying right away, like you look at Bahia of the Bark Cloud, right? It's like, and then suddenly he gets enlightened, and suddenly the bull kills him or whatever, or the ones who don't end up dying are the ones who end up going to be monks and nuns, right, within this sort of period of time. And so there's the idea that the tradition has like kind of looked at that and said, well, there must be something, there's a rule there then. And so whether or not there's actually a rule, there's this kind of like what Michelle is pointing at of like, if you're that quiet and that equanimous, are you going to do the things that are required in life to survive in life, in the world, in society way of life? Because if you don't feel the pressure or the stress to do things, it's actually you won't survive. Is like, I think that's like a very different notion of what enlightenment is, and I think what a lot of people want it to be, which is like you're going to be like a super hero if you get enlightened. You're going to, not only will you survive, you'll be better at all of the things you think you need to do. Right? I mean, that's how it's framed, right? You're going to be like a superstar, and it's like, no, actually you die. it's like, there's like some version of like you have to have a humor with that, but it is important too of like, sometimes, people, we practice for so long, we practice retreats after retreats, 30 years, 50 years, and this sense of like people feeling like, why aren't they making more progress? Why aren't we getting enlightened? And there is that question. It's like, well, are you living a life that an enlightened person would live? Or are you living a life that's like you're getting berated at stuff all the time, where you're needing to sort of like attend to all of these external things? So I think that question, though, of like recognizing that it's hard and recognizing why the heart mind won't allow itself to be vulnerable in times of great inundation is because it doesn't feel safe enough to do it. And that's totally understandable, that the heart is going to contract. The heart is going to find its hardness, right? Its defensiveness in whatever ways it does, because it is overwhelmed and we haven't developed that level of equanimity. And actually, to some degree, we should recognize that that equanimity will only come if we're also protecting the heart enough, right? And not that we can do it perfectly, not that we can do it all the time. There are times where we just need to go stretch. And over the long haul, that this is a process we're taking seriously is important, for sure. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I also want to acknowledge that if you're younger now, I think the pressure is harder. I just do. I think, it's like when I look at just the economics now, it's rough. It's rough.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It just sometimes it feels like I'm doing so much and I'm getting so little back. And maybe I'm self-aggrandizing by saying that, but um I don't know. I don't mean like I am getting a lot, but it's not money in the bank or other things.
No, but yeah, I mean, and that is another level of evaluation of, I mean, some of that is like the purest version of ourselves of we give without any expectation. And then there are relationships in which actually you do expect something more reciprocal, right? Because that's
Right.
actually appropriate. And
Right.
and to know that those are two important dynamics, that yes, we all have to work on our where we're attached to kind of where what we're getting for ourselves, and this process of kind of being whatever, everything around sort of like not being attached to outcome, including what we're receiving. On the other hand, there is a sense of self-respect and of respect between people and relationships that don't feel reciprocal, and that's not healthy, actually. And so
Yeah.
that's for certain, yeah, like another important level of the continued exploration.
So many balls in the air.
Ah.
Try to keep them.
Thanks, Nicole. Yeah. All right. Thanks, everyone. Really
Good to
wonderful
good to see you all.
yeah.
Mm.
Take care. See you next week.
Mm.